Welcome to our camera car. Peeling paint, dented panels, scuffs, scrapes and cracked lenses. Ain't she a beauty? (2001) Honda Civic SE Executive. The Civic name immediately propagates thoughts of 3 AM valve bouncing, redlining every gear change, front-wheel drive burnouts and fart cannon exhausts that sound like Alex Jones from InfoWars ranting down a squash tuba. But to those Civic owners I say step aside, for I do not associate with such riffraff. I am upper class. I am royalty. I am the SE Executive. Welcome to the divine world of the SE Executive. We present to you heated seats, heated mirrors, electronically adjustable mirrors, electric sunroof, air conditioning, heated rear screen, automatic climate control, and a full leather interior with a fake walnut trim, meaning this car is practically on par with a Rolls-Royce. This is the Automotive Anorak's daily driver and camera car. This is the sensible car. I'm currently the third owner, in which I inherited this car from my mother, who, like me, learnt to drive in it, in which she inherited it from my grandmother, who bought it new from a dealership back in 2001. It's my first ever car, in which I've owned for 5 years now, and will continue to do so until I've run it into the ground. 2001 Honda Civic SE Executive. It's the BBC Radio 4 of Civics. Presented to you here is a 7th generation Civic, which were available as hatchback or saloon body styles. All hatchback models, whether it be a base model or a Type R, were manufactured in Swindon, located in good old Britannia. Not Japan, so those of you rolling around in these hatchbacks with JDM leaves stuck everywhere and trying to fit in with all the other JDM cars, please, tell me how JDM your Euro Civic is. Under the bonnet is Honda's D-Series engine, or to be a bit more precise, the D16W7 engine, which is a 1.6 litre inline-4 single overhead cam which makes somewhere between around 110 brake horsepower and roughly 112 foot-pounds of torque whilst pretending to be VTEC. The VTEC. Yes, we have to talk about this because it's illegal to mention the word Civic and not blab on about the VTEC. Yes, technically this engine does have variable valve, timing and lift, that is electronically controlled. But this isn't one of those early Hondas that hits warp speed when you reach those higher rev ranges. No, it doesn't do that. This isn't the car to be winding down the windows and shouting, "VTEC kicked in, yo!" Nothing really happens, other than the car gets slightly louder. That aside, this engine is more playful than one might expect from what is essentially a commuter vehicle. It's not fast by any means. There is sufficient power in the mid-rev range to prevent the car from feeling sluggish. Look at this engine bay. No plastic covers everywhere to hide things. It's very honest. Mechanical throttle body. Old school. Nice. Coupled to this engine is a 5-speed manual which shifts brilliantly. The throw is surprisingly short and punchy, as well as feeling precise. See, what Honda does, and this is why Hondas just shift so well, they don't use cables to link the gear stick to the selector forks in the gearbox. Most manufacturers will use what is essentially a couple of pieces of bicycle brake cable to link the gear stick to the gearbox, because it's much cheaper to make and easier to design. This is great and all, but over time cables stretch, resulting in a gear shifter that feels like a stick in a bucket. Honda uses a series of mechanical rods and pivots which can't stretch, giving you that precise and firm shift. Also, the location of this gear stick is pure genius, but more on that in just a second. Disc brakes are equipped all around, and you get independent suspension on all corners too. No expenses spared here then, Honda. To my knowledge, all trim levels got independent suspension, and it provides a comfortable ride that isn't going to break your back, but doesn't compromise the handling ability too much either. Now this is a 5-door Civic, and its wheelbase is a lot longer than one would expect, so it won't bomb around corners like a hot hatch. But this suspension on a 3-door, or Type R model, would make for a vehicle that handles far superior to any Golf or Fiesta of the time. Steering is reasonably sharp and accurate, although slightly heavier than expected for a car that has electronic power steering, and this does limit the amount of road feel you get. Okay, we have to talk about this car's ergonomics. Look at the climate controls. Notice that unlike most cars, these simplistic controls are mounted vertically. This means that they are positioned nice and snug to the steering wheel, so your hands move such a short distance from the wheel. The position of the gear stick is just pure genius. It follows the same idea. Rather than mounting the stick low on the floor, it's mounted up high on the dash, so again, your hand travels across from the steering wheel, moving roughly 6 inches. It opens up the floor as there's no transmission tunnel, and it gives the interior a much more open feel. It's because of these features Hondas feel great to drive, and that's Honda's personality shining through. Even in what appears to be a mundane commuter vehicle or a sensible car, Honda's characteristics still manage to break the clouds and shine through. The handling, the short throw, and even this engine, although not fast, revs more than one might expect. These factors remind us of what we're driving, and who created it. Honda still manages to put a soul and life into an economy or mid-range commuter, which is what sets Honda apart from its competition. But this generation of Civic would be one of the last Civics to retain that character. The following generation would go on to lose its independent rear end, and gain a much simpler caution bar beam suspension setup. The dash-mounted shifter would disappear too. General driving dynamics would become softer, with the overall feel to the car becoming much more dampened compared to this generation. Styling, on the other hand, would become much more extravagant, starting with the next generation gaining a space-aged front, right up to the current gen cars which have been so over-designed. Externally, this car is blander than an unflavoured rice cake. Oh, those things are bad unflavoured. All that chewing and not really a great deal of reward. Hey Honda, the 1980s just phoned. It wants its wedge-shaped styling back. Whilst the wedge styling helps provide a more aerodynamic shape, and subsequently helps provide a decent fuel economy, it does mean the Civic resulted in low pedestrian safety scores. And that's about the only thing interesting about this exterior. Perhaps I'm being a little too harsh, as a lot of cars of the early 2000s fell victim to bland styling, as aerodynamics, low drag coefficients and fuel economy had started to become more of a concern at the time. I don't dislike the way this car looks by any means. I just believe it could do with a little more excitement. Some eagle-eyed viewers may have spotted the front bumper is from the facelift model, in which you would be correct. Here's what it looked like before. 18-year-old me managed to acquire the facelift bumper for free and thought it looked cool at the time, so I got it painted on the cheap and fitted up. Now 23-year-old me sits back questioning his choices and cringes as this bumper peels more than a British bloke on holiday in Spain. More on this interior though. It's 2001 and smoking in cars isn't yet frowned upon, so there's ashtrays everywhere. The fifth seat folds out into an armrest, which is nice but realistically gets as much use as a bookshelf at the Kardashians' residence. There are shelves and storage pockets everywhere, and these seats fold down, creating estate car levels of space in the back. I have even managed to squeeze a full-size bike in here. I'm drawn back to this dash again though. Its beautiful simplicity combined with the free-flowing lines, curves and uncluttered aesthetic just showcases such great design. Oh, and did I mention build quality? The fit and finish of this interior is excellent, utilising an array of high-quality materials. There are no gaps or creaking panels. This car is just over 20 years old now, and none of the markings on the buttons have worn, none of the veneers have started to peel or crack. All the switches feel firm and work as they should. Inside, this space feels incredibly open and roomy due to the large windscreen, lack of transmission tunnel, as well as the long wheelbase providing plenty of legroom for your rear passengers. The double-din radio, of course, is not standard. It's a freebie which I acquired, which now allows me to connect my phone via Bluetooth or aux, so I don't have to listen to terrible pop music whilst driving. It's a cheap and cheerful knockoff, but it does the job. Superb practicality combined with solid reliability make the Civic a strong daily driver. The mechanics of this car are practically bulletproof, unless actively neglected or not serviced. Fuel economy is respectable, averaging around 43 miles per gallon, Maintenance costs are relatively low, with parts reasonably priced and readily available. The Civic is ideal for short to medium length commutes, but it's certainly no motorway cruiser. Having only a 5-speed manual transmission means that the engine sits a little higher in the rev ranges at 70 miles an hour, compromising a little on the fuel economy, as well as sounding a little uncomfortable. According to the owner's manual, 55 miles an hour in 5th gear is the most fuel-efficient speed to sit at, making this car less than ideal for daily motorway driving. But then again, this is the story for most 5-speed manual cars. The retail price of the SE Executive in 2001 was stated at £13,995, but today you can pick up a reasonable second-hand example for around £1,000 to £1,500, making a solid second-hand car purchase if you're in the need for an inexpensive and trouble-free daily driver. 2001 Honda Civic SE Executive. A sweet package of honest and well thought out design. It's simple but clever engineering which is presented with Class A execution. But it doesn't shout about it. Instead, it just gets on with the job in hand. And for this, the Civic earns my respect. I love the fact that this generation, and the generations prior, are substance over style machines, with no unnecessary corner cutting or cheap efforts. In a way, I find it a shame that the later generations have become more flamboyant in their styling and reduced the amount of small but clever features. These cars were never about style. Early Civics are basic in their appearance, but hot on functionality and drivability. Like a lot of vehicles over the years, the Civic is no longer true to itself and has drifted heavily away from its roots. That's not to say that any modern Civic is a bad product, or that I dislike them, because that is simply untrue. With most Hondas of any year, a certain level of quality and reliability for the time is guaranteed. I just feel as if simple but innovative, straight-up cars are becoming harder to come by in the modern car industry. That wouldn't be to blame Honda or any other car manufacturer, just simply a change in what modern markets and demographics demand for. Like any product or car, it eventually goes out of fashion, and the fashion for cars like my Civic had ended some time ago. Maybe one day we'll all become fed up of sharp, aggressive, loud styling and technological gimmicks, and favour for a more honest and simple machine. So this is quite neat, because the cup holder is placed in front of the air vent, so you've got a hot drink, you stick your cup in there, and you can blast hot air on it and keep your hot drink hot. Or, if it's cold, you put the aircon on, and you keep your drinks cold. Genius.